Happy Friday, everyone. My name is Grayson Carr, and I am a Youth Coach Promise Fellow at NYLC. I'm part of the AmeriCorps program in Minnesota. That's a partnership between the federal AmeriCorps system and then the state-specific partnership with the Minnesota Alliance with Youth. And I'm joined by Julie Rogers-Bascom.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Julie Rogers-Bascom. I'm the Service Learning Coordinator at Edina Public Schools in Edina, Minnesota, which is a first-ring suburb of Minneapolis. I'm also an NYLC Service Learning Coach, working with them in their district-wide efforts to move service learning at a district level.
And as Marcus mentioned earlier, he's the Web Communications Manager for NYLC, and he'll be lurking in the background in case there are any technical difficulties and just helping to ensure that I don't screw anything up. So thank you, Marcus.
Thanks, Marcus.
So we would love to hear from you all. In the upper left-hand corner, there's an arrow where you can click on the state that you're calling from. And this is actually a very apropos, nifty little map I got from Circle. And it's just showing where service learning standards are present. Blue is yes, sort of light blue, gray is no. And since this is hopefully a learning community, cool. So Sarah Kubitz, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, is like the edge of Wisconsin.
Great. Who else is with us today? Oh, Sasha, you're in Texas. That looks maybe like Dallas, huh?
And if you're outside of the U.S., I'm not sure if there are any participants. You can put the arrow at the top of the screen and into the chat box, say where you're calling from.
So this is our way of getting to know you a little bit so we can have online conversations. It's also a chance to experiment with how to interact. Our next ask, well, there's Stephanie. Stephanie, you're in Indiana, I think. What we'd like you to do is to practice the chat box. So if some of you have not done the chat box before, go to the lower right-hand corner, type in where you are, just maybe your first name and your city, what you do, and I also want to know. We want to know what kind of weather you're dealing with. Maybe you're in the Northeast. How much snow did you have? We are used to snow here in Minnesota, and this is a popular topic for all of us who reside in the great state of Minnesota. How you doing? How's that weather? Is it hot enough for you? How much snow did you shovel? So we want to get a sense of what's happening in your community.
It's true. Weather is a big thing. I moved out from California a couple years ago, and hearing about people who have done the opposite, gone from Minnesota to California, suddenly they're at a loss for what to talk about because weather is pretty much the same.
Yeah, it is. Oh my goodness.
Nice.
Hawaii. Well, today I have to tell you we have a little bit of sunshine, so we're getting a little vitamin D.
And Sarah is from Texas Communities and Schools, and she's the Adolescent Health Coordinator. It's been in the 70s.
Okay.
Nice.
I'll visit.
Cool. Living vicariously. And Marcia from New York. I hope you're doing okay and staying safe and warm. Milwaukee, all right. Sunny 20 degrees, yeah, that's about what it is also. Stephanie from Indianapolis, and they're a cool city. She's a grant manager with the National Future Farmers of America. Well, great. Thanks, everyone. I hope if you have any questions about the chat function, feel free to send them in. Next, the agenda for this webinar, and FYI, I'll be reading out chat entries as they come in. So Whitney Lynch from Portland, Oregon, Portland, awesome city, Community Engagement Manager at the Portland Children's Museum. Wow, sounds like a great gig. the agenda for this webinar, we're going to set the context by introducing IPARD, which stands for Investigation Plan Act, which is the section that we're on today, reflect and demonstrate, talk about action, types of action, what makes action organic and natural, connected to the K-12 standards for quality practice. Next on to outcomes and guiding questions, and then finish up with additional resources. And throughout, if you have questions, if you have extra thoughts, if you have comments that you think would be pertinent and would help make this as fruitful of a time for everyone, jump in at any time, and I think that would allow us all to get the most out of this. And related to that, we'd like to, what's everyone's goal for this webinar? Hopefully we can incorporate that into the structure, and if we aren't able to get to certain points, we can follow up afterward. It can be part of the extended learning community. So goals, what conversations are you excited to have?
I like this slide. It really shows us reaching. We're trying to learn more. We're trying to be engaged.
Sarah, gather practical ideas for the teachers she supports. And Sarah is the Service Learning Coordinator for Milwaukee Public Schools.
We'll be talking about some specific types of action, and I'll give you some examples of things that I have seen. But again, this is not a one-size-fits-all educational instructional strategy. If you want more ideas of other projects, you can get some ideas on the GSN, but I encourage you to get those ideas also from your students. Youth voice, the more I engage in this practice, the more I see the power of kids really helping to design that action.
So Stephanie and Samantha all seconded Sarah, a lot of S's, all seconded Sarah's goal of gathering practical ideas for the teachers they're supporting. Just to anchor this webinar, if that doesn't happen, or if you're looking for more information, have additional thoughts afterward, we'll have our emails at the end, so feel free to contact us and we'll try to answer all your questions. Sasha, starting a youth adult council in our schools and community to address mental health, substance abuse, and physical activity. She wants to learn how to incorporate leadership training and service learning to promote awareness and education.
Cool.
Yeah, very cool. Right. So since we're all talking about service learning, and I'm noticing that some service learning in the chat box has a hyphen, some are without. Just so we're on the same page, because there are over 200 definitions of service learning, we're going to be working from NYLC's definition.
And to read what the years of research that NYLC has been involved in and has collaborated with and brought together, our common definition in service learning is an approach to teaching and learning in which students use academic knowledge and skills to address genuine community needs. Again, this is not just a project. It's really a process. That's why we started these seminars in the IPARD cycle with investigation, and then we went on to preparation. Those two phases are where much of the work and the learning really comes to life. Here's our definition. That's where it comes to life. That's where it's cemented with the learning. That's when kids connect what they're doing in the classroom to meeting a community need. So we're excited to talk to you about some of the ideas that we have about how to make action relevant and meaningful in your classroom.
And Samantha, thank you for apologizing about the hyphen. It's all good. Just don't do it again. That's all we're asking.
Well, the reason that I like to hyphenate it, and there's no right or wrong, really, but the service is connected to learning. And oftentimes, I'm sure in many of your venues, people are talking about service learning when they really mean community service. Community service is good and important work, but because we're working with kids and moving them towards actual learning goals, we want to make sure that we're connecting the service and the learning, and I think that's why we use the hyphen.
And while that hyphen, I think, definitely gets at combining two major aspects of culture and society, service and learning, and brings them together to make something that's greater than the sum of its parts. Both of those two aspects are also so big, not only taken individually, but together. And we have all these options for service, we have all these options for learning and schooling, and it can be absolutely overwhelming. So how do we break it up? How do we make it manageable? And
one of the things I like to say for teachers, especially teachers who are new to this pedagogy, is that this doesn't have to be an add-on. Service learning is an instructional strategy that can help you attack and meet your standards. So it's not just a project that you do afterward. I actually remember somebody saying to me, well, I can't do service learning because I can't do a field trip. I'm telling you, you don't have to do a field trip. A lot of this work can be, and we'll get into the different types of action, but a lot of this work can be done in the classroom.
Right. So in addition to making service learning a little more manageable with bite-sized pieces, IPARD also addresses the issue that, and I encountered this a lot in community organizing, and really it seems like it's found in all spheres of work, that our immediate response is to leap into action. There's this problem, we have a solution, or we may have a solution, we think we have a solution, and we've just had 4 or 5 cups of coffee and we're pumped up to go. So if you notice, the action portion in this cycle is actually the smallest bit, and that's to ensure that that action is as effective and efficient as possible.
I think sometimes we get the idea that the action has to take place every day for X amount of times, or it has to have many hours. I think it can have both. It can be a one-shot deal, or it can be the action can be taking place weekly. So what I think we're here to say is that that investigation and that preparation is really important before you start jumping into the action.
Which perfectly speaks to the first portion of delving into what is action itself. And action is it's the next step from planning and preparation, not only in the IPARD process, but hopefully in any endeavor. That if participants have investigated a community problem thoroughly, if they've put together a solid plan, action should come naturally.
Can I give an example right now? Because I was actually working with a teacher the other day that it struck me. She is a fabulous, very skilled teacher. They have been trying to get a student action group around green issues in their school. Well, she had invited a student to come and discuss what could be done. What I was not hearing in this group was what the girl thought was important, what this young woman thought she should be taking action in. So again, if we dive right into the action and say, this is what we're going to do, we're losing an opportunity to get kids to own the problem and to take ownership for their learning, and also to come up with their own ideas. This harkens back to one of the 8 standards of high-quality service learning, which is youth voice. When we have youth coming up with ideas, we're teaching them how to be problem solvers. I don't know about you, but these kids, I'm showing my age right now, but I'm on the other end of that midway through, and I want they're going to be making decisions that are going to impact me. I want them to be making decisions based on thorough investigation and preparation. All right, here we swing into service learning action and the different types of action. The first type of action that I want to talk about is direct action. We often think about this as when students really establish personal contact with the people or the communities in need. And again, I remind you that this is, I like to think about that we're doing with and not for. This is not necessarily a charity model. This is really about participating in solving a community need. direct service could include visiting a nursing home. It could be serving at a food pantry or a feeding center. Anything, what could be tutoring, anything that you have direct contact. The second type of service action is indirect action, and that's when kids, students don't have a personal contact, but they work on a related issue. Oftentimes, this is where food drives land. Food drives are good and important work, but no connection necessarily with the recipient. The last type of action we call advocacy. When I ask kids, what does advocacy mean? That's where we kind of land on that word called change. That's what advocacy work in a service learning setting is about. It's about changing the system or finding a systemic or political solution to an issue. That might be when kids go to their legislators and ask them to make a change in a law or propose a law. I'm going to give you an overall view of taking an issue and how direct, indirect, and advocacy might look. Let's use an example of working with seniors in a senior center. And maybe the learning goals, there's actually some learning goals in our state standards that have to do with healthy aging and with understanding the aging process. Now, if there was an indirect solution, that might look like students writing valentines for people in a nursing home connected to language arts standards. An indirect, because they're not having any personal contact. Good and important work connected to curriculum. A direct type of action might mean establishing a relationship with a person at a nursing home and visiting regularly to form connections, to support, to understand the aging process. An advocacy approach might look like students in 9th grade connected to their government class, where they are investigating some of the needs and issues around senior care, and they land on that the senior visiting nurses or home care services, there's some problems in the system, and so they start to advocate for having some kind of regulation or an overall monitoring system. So that's taking one theme and looking at it in different ways. And again, this needs to be led by the students. They're the ones who can help you decide where the action needs to take place.
Sarah, thank you so much for your comment. She wrote, "My understanding of direct action includes personal contact with animals and or the earth as well as people."
Absolutely.
And right on. I think not only thinking in terms of human culture and human environment, but considering the systems level change that I think many of us are interested in. Not only how we interface with the environment and how we coexist in all aspects of the world. So
Absolutely.
Thank you for that.
Absolutely, great. Let me take that example and kind of flesh out what it might look indirect, direct, and advocacy. I was in a first grade classroom last week, and the teacher, their topic of study is animals. And she was asking the kids, well, what are some of the issues? And the kids said, well, there are a lot of homeless animals in the world. There are animals who don't have any homes. And she said, yes, that's really right. What do you think we can do about that? Well, an indirect approach. One student said, I think we should raise money and buy food for the animals who are homeless. And the teacher said, absolutely, that's a good solution. Yes, good and important work. That's an indirect solution, and it's something that kids can do. One little friend said, well, Mrs. Peterson, I think we should adopt an animal in our class. I think we should have a class pet. You should have seen her eyes widen when the student suggested that. She said, yes, that would be a solution. Do you think we could do that? And she asked some more inquiry-based questions to really lead the kids to further their investigation. That would have been a direct approach. Not necessarily it would work, but that is a direct approach if a student chooses to do that in their home. The advocacy voice, there was one student, and I love this, a little first grader, a little 6-year-old, says, well, I think what we should do is tell people that there needs to be more homes for animals who don't have them. I said, absolutely, how would you do that? And he said, well, let's make a poster, and we'll post it on the stop sign. So when people drive through the school to pick up their kids, they'll see that there's a need. Well, we needed to flush that one out a little bit. But again, that's our little, those are our little advocates looking at a system-wide change.
So another consideration besides direct, indirect, and advocacy is what grade level are you working with?
I'm going to share some examples of some work that I've been involved with, but also other schools that I've been connected with. The elementary level, there was a wonderful example in second grade, some learners who were struggling in their reading and writing, their literacy. They were in a pull-out program. Teacher asked them, well, what do you think needs to be changed in our community? And one little boy said, you know, I'm a second grader now, but last year I was new in first grade. And I came in the middle of the year, and my teacher would say, okay, go down to Mrs. Brown's room. And I didn't know where Mrs. Brown's room was. Or they would say, it's time for us to go to the gym. And I didn't know where that was. So I think what we need to do, one of the solutions, said this little second grader, let's create a map for kids who are new to the school. I thought that was a wonderful solution to a community need in our school. Sometimes we think about community needs as being outside of us. It's the people who are in poverty. Yes, those are needs. But we also have needs in our own backyard. And so I encourage kids to practice and to think about how we can meet the needs of kids in our people in our own community. The middle school level, I worked with one girl who was really interested in the life and the life cycle of bees. There's a real problem with colony collapse, and she was studying about it in her science class, and also she was really interested in it. But as part of her government service learning experience, they were asked to take to learn about some legislation and about how government impacts everyday citizens and how we can impact government. So she actually presented, she did all this research, and she presented to the city council to create a variance, an educational variance, so her school, her middle school, could have a beehive on top of their school. So let's switch to that high school population. Now this is where you can, I think in elementary and sometimes in middle, you can do a lot of co-curricular service learning experiences. When you get to the high school, sometimes that's not as easy, but I still think they can be very powerful. Let me explain one project that I was involved with. I was working with a group of art students, advanced art, and they were working on portraiture and how to create fine portraiture. We connected them with a group who works with people in a mental health facility. The young people, the high school students, partnered with a person who was suffering from some kind of mental health issue, and they spent time drawing them, sketching them, making a portraiture. So connected to curriculum, direct service, and meeting the standards, the 8 standards of high-quality service. The next component of action is documentation. And, man, it's so important to keep track of what you're doing, how you're doing it, in multiple media forms. So writing, data collection, multimedia recordings, interviews, drawing. And it's vital not only for personal and group reflection, and reflection I think is where learning really happens, but it allows projects to build on each other so that it's not starting from square one every time, but that it's a reiterative process. I think as demonstrated by contemporary civil rights movements right now, all of those videos, all of those pictures, testimonials, helps keep the pressure on. If that tactic is used for service learning,
that systemic change or even one-time endeavors can be as effective as possible. So how do you ensure that your action isn't just existing in a bubble, but that it has takeaway not only for the participants or the people served, but everyone affected? Final component of action is self-assessment and reflection, building on the documentation process, but it's also seeing where the participants thought there were successes, what needs to be improved, how it could be done differently in the future. This is aligning the investigation, planning, and preparation processes.
All right, here's a little break in the action. We've been talking now for 30 minutes. I want each and every one of you at your desk to stand up. Take 2 deep breaths. I did this with students yesterday. I had them all stand up, and I looked at them, and I said...
Do it, Marcus.
I looked at them, and I said, did you know you're all 7% smarter? Because research tells us that when we stand up, we get a big rush of oxygen to our brain. So that's what I'm asking you to do as well. And then one student said to me, it's not really smarter, you're just more focused. And that's another thing I want to comment on. We've been talking for 30 minutes. Now I'm throwing it over to you right now. I want you all to practice reflection. I want you to practice reflecting on what we've been learning. So I want you to write down 1 word or 2 words about what you're thinking about right now, what's helpful, maybe what reflection means to you, maybe an idea of what reflection activities you have used. So we're going to take a pause, and we're going to look on the screen and hope this just populates like crazy. And I'm standing up.
Betty Ramirez says, everything is possible if we look at the issues in different ways.
That really speaks to diversity. Yeah, absolutely.
It's always more complex.
One of our standards of high-quality service learning is diversity, and we're not just talking about racial diversity. We're talking about perspective. Kids need to understand perspective. We need to.
Reflecting in learning, in all learning styles. Yes. I think that speaks to the looking at issues in different ways, that we think in different ways, we process in different ways, and I don't often use this word, but it truly is awesome. I like the idea that documentation allows projects to build on each other.
Say some more about that, Sarah, or does somebody have a response to Sarah? That's
please,
really,
Sarah, say more about that.
That's really awesome.
I'm glad that resonated. Stephanie, serve as evaluation. Could you expand on that? Stephanie responds, reflection serves as an evaluation tool.
Oh, absolutely.
Heck yeah. Oh my gosh, yeah.
And again, reflection doesn't have to just be talking or writing. I've seen kids put together a play to really reflect on their issues. I've seen students, young students, those kids who were advocating for a dog or for issues around homeless, animals that are homeless. They then went and drew pictures and sounded out words that they were learning, looking at a word wall, really connecting all those standards.
Yeah. Samantha, reflection can get the student perspective of the success of a project, ideas for more projects, how to engage students, and more.
And again, that you guys are great because we're reflecting. I'm taken back to the whole issue of progress monitoring. Really, that's about evaluation. What's going right? What's not going right? What we need to change, and how we're impacting the community. I think as teachers, sometimes that word assessment is kind of scary. It's kind of there's judgment. I asked a group of 5th graders once about evaluation and assessment, and I asked them, well, why do you think we make some assessments? Why do you think we step back and we look at that? You know, out of the mouths of babes. We do that so we know what we're doing well and so we can make it better. So again, that duration and intensity standard really speaks to there's not one right way or one wrong way. We always know that we do. We need a time to reflect and celebrate our what we've done well, and also what can we do better next time.
Sasha writes, youth can teach and inspire us to take the time to reflect as well as act in a meaningful way. And Marcia, I think, really speaks to the method of that, of one-on-one private conferences with students to review their self-assessment and adults' assessments of their work. Absolutely. Moving on, because I'm cognizant of time, another factor, and this is segueing into the K-12 standards for quality practice, in addition to the direct, indirect advocacy and grade levels, another consideration with that action is duration and intensity. Is the project a day? Is it a one-time event? Is it a month? Is it a semester? Is it going through multiple cycles, maybe through the direct, indirect advocacy, where it addresses an increasingly systemic solution every single time over maybe a year or two? How many people and levels are involved, and how rigorous are the academic and reflective components?
One more comment on that. We know that a service learning cycle that lasts a semester is really a good target. And I'm not saying act for a semester, but that whole cycle, the investigation, preparation, action, reflection, and demonstration, if that can be pulled out, and that doesn't mean every single day you're working on it. I had a teacher ask me, do I have to have youth voice every single day of our time while we're working in this class? No. You work in other elements. You've got other things on your plate. You've got other standards that you need to meet. So pushing for extending that learning, that also allows for transfer of knowledge from what they've learned in their classroom, their service learning experience, transferring that to other places.
So duration and intensity is one of 8 K-12 standards for quality practice, which was co-developed by NYLC. And what they do is, in essence, develop a common ground in language so various communities learn from each other. I mentioned earlier that there are over 200 definitions of service learning. So how can we build on each other? Getting back to one of the comments from Sarah, documentation allows projects to build on each other. So maybe...
And this also, these 8 standards were developed, I think, in what, 2008, Marcus? Is that right, 2008? Yeah, right. Developed after years of research, delving into conversations, a thorough process of what makes high-quality service learning. We know that the better we do our service learning, the better learning outcomes we have. And we're working with youth to help them reach their goals.
Whitney Lynch just wrote, teachers also need to include themselves in the reflection process. Absolutely. It's not enough to just lead students in their own reflection, but teachers need to reflect on their processes or process as a whole on how to support their students. Marcus, Samantha just wrote that she lost connection to the audio. Okay.
I just want to mention, too, that there is a place you can find more information about all of these elements of high-quality service learning, and it's called the GSN. We'll talk more about that, but just I'm planting the idea because I'm forecasting. Isn't that an instructional strategy? Forecasting.
Yeah. Okay. So maybe this analogy or analogy is useful. I like to think of service learning as a house, or I guess that's a simile. There are innumerable ways to build a house, and communities speaking different languages are all building houses while facing similar challenges like weather or needs, like building materials. And wouldn't it be helpful if we could just equitably learn from each other? And what would be the first step to make that happen? Developing some common terms would be helpful, as well as empowering each other to identify what works best about building a house or a structure. However, different cultures value different things, and I'm personally not comfortable making a sweeping statement about aspects of a house I personally value. For example, I could say ceilings are great and necessary and every house should have them, but I automatically marginalize many communities around the world that would prefer or even need to see the stars at night. So the best practices instead get at things like having the input from the people who will be living in the house, or incorporating input from the community, because one person building a house for others is slow and probably not the best. Reflecting on the process so there is improvement. Marcia asks, please repeat that source. GSN, and we'll get to that in the last...
But I think it's gsn.nylc.org. Is that right? So it'll be also flashed up on your screen in a little bit, but gsn.nylc.org.
You know what I could just do is... Oh, cool. Marcus is going to input it into the chat box. Rather than go over all 8 of the standards, because that would just be ridiculously boring, the other standard that I think is especially useful in this context or when thinking about action is meaningful service. Meaningful service provides a sense of purpose, connection, relevance, and usefulness. It's recognizing a need in the community, it's fulfilling that recognized need, it's making sure that it's appropriate to the age of the students involved. And in service learning, all activities should have personal relevance for the participants as well as the populations that the service serves. So
let me give you an example of meaningful service in this context of the action phase. I heard of a story of a classroom where the classroom teacher decided that they were going to tie blankets for a homeless shelter. You might not know about this in Hawaii, but around here we do a lot of blanket tying where we take 2 pieces of fleece, put them together, snip the ends, and tie the edges. Well, this 6th grade class decided they were going to make tie blankets for a homeless shelter. So they did that, and they had I think the teachers and a parent go deliver it to the homeless shelter. And when they arrived and said, "Here are your blankets," the homeless shelter went, "Oh, okay, thanks." And actually, the teachers and the parents were a little bit like, "What? They didn't appreciate this? Oh my gosh!" The next year, there was a teacher who had been through a service learning training and really and probably took it a little bit deeper, said, we need to find out what was going on there. Let's not do service if it's not what they need. Really important to ask that question, what is it they need? So she had one of her students call the shelter and say, what is it that we could do that would be a support to you? And the shelter said, well, we really appreciate your efforts. The blankets were great. The only problem is they weren't long enough to cover the men who sleep on these mats that are the mats are much bigger than the blankets were, so it really didn't meet our needs. Now I'm explaining more of a community service experience because that wasn't necessarily connected to their curriculum, but it applies in that we need to ask those questions about what is needed, what is meaningful service.
Thanks, Julie. I heard you say incorporate a few different aspects of meaningful service, which one, it's the experience is appropriate to the participant ages and developmental abilities. It encourages participants to understand their service experience in the context of the underlying societal issues being addressed. That could definitely be woven into a project like that. Sounds like an interesting and engaging service activity. I think that always makes experiences better. Another component is that it leads to attainable and visible outcomes that are valued by those being served. And this last point, like one component of that could that looks somewhat, if that needs improvement, like the teacher designing the project entirely without taking into account the community needs and only focusing on the academic needs of the students. Or if that's more of an advanced level, like teachers are co-developing with students and co-developing with the community voices a solution and a response to a given issue. All of these standards can be found in much more detail on the LIFT website. And
Marcus, can you put the LIFT website on there as well? So this is a great way if you're looking for some ways to understand service learning deeper, better, but also maybe share with your colleagues if you're doing a service learning experience or some instruction, you're weaving service learning into instruction. This might be a way to bring a couple of your colleagues together, sit down, and watch a 5 to 10 minute video. So when somebody asks the question, some practical ideas to support teachers, I would say go here, go to the LIFT, because that will give you some an overview, but also some specifics. But I also want to point out something that will be launched by the end of the day or by Monday morning is a project planning tool developed by NYLC. It will be a editable Word doc, right?
Web form would be more accurate.
It's a web form, according to our web guru, Marcus. It's a web document that you can fill out to help teachers with the planning process. But again, remember that youth voice, because we get to some really different outcomes when they are engaged and informed and a part of the process.
And actually, I just want to make one minor adjustment that the project planning tool isn't only for teachers. Shoot, and youth should do it. Anyone involved should do it. And there's a very cool interactive feature that assesses how rigorous or how equitable the project is. So I'm very stoked to see it come out early next week. So just to wrap up, and I know many of you are probably sick of hearing us talk, but just to link the two major ideas that we've been chatting about. One is, and this is going back to the House simile. One is the K-12 standards for quality practice, and those are the materials of the House. Meaningful service, the duration and intensity at the bottom. And the method is investigation, planning and preparation, action, reflection, and demonstration, or IPARD.
A little bit about some of the action. What do you want to have happen from your actions? And I preface this. Oftentimes we hear from teachers, oh, the kids feel so good, they did such a great thing. This is not just about the feel-good aspect. This is about where learning is cemented. So our outcomes are influenced by our planning and preparation. It's when things take place. All that investigation and planning and preparation, which is where you're connecting to learning, that's where it comes to life. The issue or the service opportunity is really addressed, and this is where your evidence is collected. So here's another opportunity for you to talk with us. What do you hope your students learn, achieve, know, or gain from action? What are some of your thoughts? And we're going to ask you to stand up again because it's more than 12 minutes. After 12 minutes, people shut down.
Betty says, or writes, any suggestions on how to engage school teachers to allow service learning to happen in their classrooms through a city program?
Not sure what you mean by a city program. You mean, if you mean connecting with the city?
Or do you mean City Department of Education?
One way to encourage teachers to consider service learning is to really look at why it's good for kids. That's always where I start. Why would we want kids to solve problems? Why do we want them to engage? And I think part of it is because our jobs as educators is really to prepare them for life after their K-12 experience, whether it be college or career. We want them to develop those critical thinking skills, which relates back to the rigorous curriculum and the way in which you present your learning or the learning opportunities. I think it creates engaged citizens. We know that there's a lot of positive outcomes, and there's other webinars out there that will talk about some of the outcomes of service learning.
So Betty responds, I represent a city government program and find it hard to engage teachers.
Well, look at it from how is it going to benefit the students? If kids are going to be involved in your city program, how is it going to benefit? How is it going to benefit them? Because teachers are looking at how it best benefits and how they can partner. If you want to have a separate conversation, I'd be happy to kind of shake this out with you or a little bit, tease it out a little bit.
And another thought is look at it from, given that so many of teachers' livelihoods are based on high-stakes testing nowadays, that service learning results in higher grades, better attendance, better graduation rates.
Engaged students. This is like ding, ding, ding. We want our kids to be engaged. That's what connects them to learning.
Yeah, and when implemented with fidelity and at all levels, shoot, service learning is just fun for everyone involved. So, some ideas. Samantha writes, our district has a community service requirement that has been in place for 20 years. I was recently hired with the goal of moving the program from just community service to ultimately just service learning. This will be beneficial for students, but falls on the teachers to incorporate service learning into their classroom. How can I get folks on board with moving the program toward that goal? Off-the-cuff reaction, why just on the teachers? Shoot, there should be a youth advisory council or something to help see that happen at all levels. Mentioned the high-stakes testing, making it more fun. It's and the GSN that is coming on a future slide has a whole clearinghouse and learning community where there are tons of resources also.
Good suggestion from Stephanie. Teachers want to know that it won't be a lot of extra work. Absolutely. We need to show them that service learning is the way that they meet their standards. It's also, this is a scary, you have to let go a little bit. You got to have the kids take some ownership, and that's hard as teachers to be a little bit more fluid. So it is a risk. One of the things that I've done with new teachers, actually I target teachers who I know will be willing to do a service learning experience or use service learning in their classroom, and I really support the heck out of them, and I make sure they get what they need. And I'm not talking dollars, but I walk with them. I coach them through what they need to do, how they need to do it, how they need to freeze things, what do they need to collect, how do they connect it to curriculum, how to use youth voice. And when one teacher is doing it feeling really excited about it, it really can be contagious. I also host training sessions and feed them, and that was often one of the ways. And I honor them. I honor their effort because it takes sometimes it takes extra to get it to start, but if we create a community of teacher leaders who are supporting the service learning work in your school, in your grade level, in your subject area, then they feel like they're not doing that alone.
In addition to the great great comments that have been coming through the chat feed, just if there are any further comments that you'd like to make or personal experiences that you'd like to share, now we would love to hear from all of you. Yeah, you're welcome, Betty. Well, I can't take the credit. Thank you, everyone, for helping Betty.
Yeah, awesome.
Just getting into some additional resources, and I guess linking the previous conversation, there are definitely some service days and celebrations throughout the year that develop momentum and may perhaps serve as a springboard for some service learning opportunities. These are some This slide and video is going to be uploaded to the GSN next week, so these sources will be available then. Oh, and Marcus is, yeah, thanks for supporting us, Marcus.
Yeah, awesome, thank you.
Like we said, just a reminder that the Lift is a great resource. There's videos, there are specific project ideas, there are reflection questions, there are in-depth activity ideas linked to all of the K-12 standards.
Created by NYLC, but also with support from State Farm. They've been a fabulous partner of NYLC.
Yes, Stephanie, community service, yes, it's often an add-on or a supplement. Service learning is a pedagogy. It's a philosophy of education that school and community shouldn't have a figurative wall between them. It shouldn't have as much of an age boundary or a different kind of age demarcation as there currently exists.
And I think you're really right that sometimes it can be viewed as an add-on. I don't know about you, but there are often new initiatives, and I have heard teachers say, well, I'm not going to do X because next year it's going to be a new initiative. I don't think that's the case with service learning. Service learning is really a way to teach. And so if we can encourage teachers to use service learning as a way to meet their learning and character goals, then we'll be killing a couple of standards with one stone, if you can pardon that.
And Stephanie, absolutely. That change in thinking takes time and a lot of examples, and it's one thing to walk into a classroom and say, boy, this really doesn't look like John Dewey's Common School or Go Horace Mann or all these other great education thinkers. On the other hand, NYLC is sort of doing that and making sure that it's evidence-based and founded in data and putting together these tools, trainings, and programs to make sure that it happens.
Go on to that GSN. I'm telling you, there's some great stuff there, some really great stuff. Marcus, I can't believe we've been talking for almost an hour. Oh, my gosh. We were going to do this. We were going to say 30 minutes because people start falling asleep. I hope you didn't. I hope taking a stretching and taking a deep breath, and I so appreciate your comments on the chat box.
Yeah.
It really is going to be helpful, really helpful.
Has made all of this so much more fruitful.
And fun.
One last, Julie's mentioned this a few times, the Generator Schools Network, GSN. It's an online community where people can interface with each other. It's a clearinghouse, thousands of resources, and very exciting. Like I said earlier, the project planning tool is going to be a major facet of that. Hopefully by the end of today, definitely by the start of next week. Thank you. And hopefully this is what you look like on your end.
Well, this is certainly what we're looking like on our end because it gives us a chance to share what we know, ask some questions, and engage with you in a format that, quite frankly, I'm the older one in the bunch here. This is new for me. So learning online without face-to-face, it's been terrific. Thank you so much for participating. If any of you have any comments or questions, you can connect with Grayson or myself. We'd be happy to get back to you. And we'll leave the chat box up for just a minute or so before we close it down. And if you have any other questions, we will see if we can help you out. Again, have a fabulous weekend. Thanks for joining us. I'm Julie Rogers-Bascom with Grayson Carr, and we're happy to be walking this path towards high-quality service learning with you.
Yeah, thanks, everyone. I hope you have a great start to the weekend. Great.